This is Going Under, Anesthesia Answered with Dr. Brian Schmutzler. I'm Vahid Sadrzadeh, and we're brought to you by the Butterfly Network.
All right, I'm going to let you in on something that's completely changed the way I practice. I've been using Butterfly probes for years. It's a portable ultrasound that plugs right into my compatible smartphone or tablet, so I can start scanning at the bedside in seconds. If you use the older versions, or even if you're new to the handheld ultrasound world, let me tell you why the new IQ3 is a game changer and really impressive. First off, having an ultrasound that's literally in my pocket means I can move faster, whether it's vascular access, procedural guidance, or just getting real-time insights from my patients. And the tech inside this tiny device is pretty incredible. Biplane imaging allows you to see the short axis and long axis simultaneously. Huge for procedural guidance and honestly a great tool for learners. The new needle out of plane preset even shifts the scan plane digitally so I can see the needle tip sooner, which makes a real difference when precision matters. And the image quality, well, the IQ3 holds up against some of the high-end cart-based systems that I've used in the past. That's impressive for something this portable. If you're looking for a device that supports your practice, I can't recommend the Butterfly IQ3 enough. And right now, they're running a special offer. You can get $750 off the latest IQ3. Check it out at butterflynetwork.com.
And look, for the first time ever, we have a
butterfly on
show them the
screen.
little, there we go, the little portable handheld. And somebody who is very close to this device and knows a little something about it, Dr. Davinder Ramsingh, who is Vice President of Clinical Research and Development at Butterfly Network. And Davinder, thanks so much for joining us here to talk about not only this POCUS device, but what you guys are doing at Butterfly.
Oh, thanks, Vahid. Brian, great to be on. Yeah, excited to talk about it. I'll just quickly talk about my own journey about how I got into this position, and excited to talk about the technology. So I'm a cardiac anesthesiologist by training, and that was about 16 years ago. So I've been out in practice, still practice clinically, and have always been in academic centers. And it was really interesting. I had the opportunity to learn transthoracic echo during my fellowship. Again, 16 years ago, and then I found myself quickly as an attending in this academic facility doing much more benefit in terms of preoperative assessment, intraoperative kind of risk stratification, and just adjustment of acute issues with transthoracic echocardiography than I was just doing TEE in the cardiac OR. And that kind of got me the spark of this whole idea of what is POCUS, and the idea of, hey, incorporating ultrasound imaging into your bedside assessment to kind of, instead of having to guess what's going on, is the patient hypotensive because they're hypovolemic, or is it because of cardiogenic shock? Is the patient having hypoxia because of a big pleural effusion, or because of, airspace disease? Is there content in the stomach, which I hope we can talk a little bit more about. That's a hot topic right now. All of these questions, I quickly realized that, hey, ultrasound imaging gives you the insight into seeing that organ system. And instead of having to guess, you can kind of just figure out what's going on right at the moment. And very quickly, I found my sort of what I was doing clinically much more related to POCUS and the clinical value of that. And so started developing a training curriculum and kind of continued to show the value of that to anesthesiologists. And now kind of fast forward, 10 years, 2019 became a requirement for ACGME guidelines for residency training. So great to see that. And even our National Society here, American Society of Anesthesiology, embracing POCUS as a certificate. And so really kind of showing the value of point of care ultrasound. So it's been great to see the journey of how that's changed from, this kind of novel concept to now really becoming, Brian, you said it earlier, about kind of something that truly is something we should probably have, ready and available. And great to see that the technology has kind of come along the way with that, right? Instead of having to wheel a cart, now we're talking about handheld POCUS. And I really like to talk about that today too, about just kind of, POCUS now is, I think more anesthesiologists you talk to, everybody gets what POCUS is. And clearly ultrasound for regional and vascular access is mainstream now, kind of expected sort of standard of care across, the United States. But handheld POCUS, I think that's the emerging area where technology really has gotten closer to that cart system. So, kind of excited to talk about that and dive in there with the topic of POCUS and diagnostic imaging.
So I just have a couple questions for you. Just on a personal level, how often do you still practice?
3 to 4 times a month. So Fridays usually are my days. Yeah. So I work out in Southern California, 2 different academic centers, adjunct professor at University of California, Irvine and Loma Linda.
Nice. And then how did you get connected with Butterfly? How did that process happen?
Yeah, so so I've always been a research person. I mentioned a little bit quickly about how started doing some education training programs and research in that. Did a lot of kind of sensor evaluation and research studies on both ultrasound and hemodynamic sensors. And to kind of the quick answer is like, how do you keep sort of your research lab funded? Well, it relies a lot on sponsors, right? And talking to industry and things like that. And so unexpected to me, that industry relationship kind of branched into these opportunities to go look at supporting research internally within these industry entities, just because you end up having so many interactions and kind of seeing that. So I thought I was going to be an academic doc my whole time, just kind of doing research and kind of trying to do publications and grant funding and all of that, and joined the industry because of the fact that if you believe in the technologies, it can be a really great venue, because now instead of having to work on just the care center of that particular facility or trying to get one or two publications out that can try to hopefully push the needle, on the industry side, hopefully you can work on pathways to get things cleared through regulatory bodies in the US and abroad. And that's been incredibly rewarding, kind of being able to be part of that whole kind of development process. So that is kind of my roller coaster path. Definitely
Nice.
not something, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, would definitely not thought we'd be having this conversation in the role that I'm in, but blessed for the opportunity.
We went to the POCUS forum, and that's where we kind of got introduced a few weeks ago in Boca Raton. And that was a big deal for kind of the physician community, the POCUS community, really letting the world know that Butterfly Network really has, in terms of the technology, has the components to make this global, right? And it's already global. We've seen some of the physicians that were up on stage talking about how unique this device is, and it's not only right where you go in the countryside in London and you're using this, but it's third world countries and
Bangladesh
right,
Ukraine,
and
battlefield,
right, like 4 hours from a hospital, and they're able to do ultrasounds on women who are pregnant. Talk about that scope of it, and taking it to third world countries and really using it in those kind of settings.
Yeah, I mean, I think Butterfly's chip-based technology has allowed point-of-care ultrasound to go to spaces that you already talked about, Vahid, that have never been accessible before, right? Because of this highly portable unit that allows whole body imaging, it makes it much more practical to take you to those settings. That's why Butterfly has the most number of probes in Gaza, most number of probes in the Ukraine, and and you talked a little bit about some of our efforts in sub-Saharan Africa for helping with obstetrical ultrasound. It's really the technology that's really allowed that to happen, because one, the development of it is at a dramatically lower price point, and the other is the functionality, the ability to plug into a smartphone and tablet to be able to allow whole body imaging, kind of gives you those abilities to kind of do it kind of in ways that never been available before.
So I'm not a big tech guy. When it comes to IT stuff, I have people I have to ask. You kind of
like it, though.
I like it, but I'm no good at it. So
you're a good user, but yeah.
I'm a good user, but so I'm going to ask a little bit. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you understand this much better than I do. I think the fact that it's a chip-based and not a crystal-based system has allowed the improvement. And so what we were talking about, I think on our last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, the only thing that the crystal-based systems have improved is the quality of the screen, right? The crystal-based handheld, or the crystal-based cart-based, that people carry them around, it's got a crystal in there. The ultrasound image is as good as it's going to get, pretty much. I mean, there might be little tweaks, but it's not like going from SD to HD, right? All you're doing is making the screen 4K, 8K, 16K, 32K, whatever. The screen's getting better. I think what's happening with and again, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know this tech as well as you do, but I think what's happening is with the AI and all that sort of stuff and the chip-based system, you're actually creating better images because of the chip. And it doesn't really matter that it's on my iPad mini or my cell phone. The image quality is very, very good. So maybe speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to. And Brian, for the most part, you're absolutely right. Like, when you talk about piezoelectric crystals, that's how it's improved, right? Is a better screen. And then, the other thing though to talk about is, what makes a device, that probe be 12K versus 7K versus, TE probes are 75K. the price point is just like if you think about any kind of like hard like substance that we take out, like a diamond, for example, right? Like, that whole cut clarity kind of thing.
Right.
Vaguely remember that from looking
Oh,
for
yeah.
my wife
Yeah, the
20
four
years ago. It
C's.
was like
Four
that.
C's.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
do
Four
remember that
Cs. There,
stuff.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's right.
So same thing with these piezoelectric crystals, right? They have the harvest from the earth and manufactured. Some of there's actually lead components that are integrated into these devices. That, but those are built mechanically from the earth and then placed, and they have to have that configuration and tuned to a certain frequency range, right? And then yes, there are some mechanical things that can happen to make it better, but the innovation cycle of that, one, it's already played out for the last 30 years, and the kind of like the runway for that has gotten pretty flat, right? So so much of the advancements are on the screen, the interface, the UI, and maybe making a little bit small tweaks on kind of like how the power gets generated to those crystals and received back and forth. But you talked about that flip versus chip-based ultrasound, right? So now revolutionary technology of not requiring any of those harvested minerals from the earth, rather using silicon wafers connected to microcircuitry that are connected to chips. And just like our phones get faster and our computers get faster, same thing, same logic applies when you have a whole digital kind of ultrasound solution, is that the process of improvement is something that's just dramatically, like there's essentially just like how your iPhone gets or your smartphone gets faster and better every couple of years. We're on that same trajectory with ultrasound. And kind of I like that kind of, we often use that cell phone analogy, kind of just talking about handheld focus, and love to talk a little bit about that, because I do think it's changed the concept of what handheld focus could do, just like what's happened with your smartphone. Like when you first had a cell phone versus a smartphone, so much more functionality. But back to your question, Brian, like that's what Butterfly makes it so unique. And actually might be interesting to the audience to know is that this is actually a 3D array, right? Like, so this is if you think for people who are really into ultrasound and advanced, users that think about 3D echocardiography or 4D obstetrical ultrasound, that capability is the fundamental matrix of what this chip-based ultrasound is. And that allows, and the way the keyword of beam steering is something that we are able to provide in a handheld device that nobody else can, because of that kind of exclusive, chip-based concept.
Well, maybe talk about, Davinder, a little bit of the functionality and connectivity with the device. Brian has it here with we'll show it. He has it here in studio with his iPad mini, but you said you can connect it to
a phone
or a laptop or any of those devices.
Yeah. So, the way, because all the sort of hard work is done from the probe itself in terms of like the ultrasound admittance and things like that, the connectivity is to any kind of tablet or smartphone device. And then you download an app, right? Like, and you download an app that allows you then to give you functionality to access that probe. And then now you're off and running. You can use it to be able to look at, to go back to the technical component, again, that whole point about piezoelectric crystals versus chip-based ultrasound is that that's what gives us the ability to that whole beam steering and ability to adjust the array electronically. That's how we're able to go to that linear probe that has that higher frequency range versus a curved linear probe and the phased array, all from a single probe. And so that's why you can just plug it into download the app, plug it in, and kind of choose by preset what you want to scan.
Yeah, I mean, and the other two pieces of technology are obviously the biplane imaging, right? Which is cool. I mean, we can do a very, very good TTE with biplane imaging. We can, look at an aortic valve. And so I don't do open heart anymore. So you're the expert on this one, but
explain what that means though for like the patient, right? Like if I'm a patient, how is that set it apart from the cart-like, or what am I getting different if I'm the patient?
So right now, to do a TTE, well, usually in the operating room we do a TEE, where we drop a probe in the esophagus and look at it from behind. With the Butterfly, we can do a TTE, which is where we look at the heart from the front, from outside the body. The majority of cart-based ultrasound systems, it's relatively difficult to do biplane imaging, meaning looking at it both in this axis and this axis. You get a 90-degree image, one from or 180-degree image, one from the other, right? So, or 90-degree image, one from the other. So you can basically reconstruct and so aortic valve is kind of the classic example, and you can explain this better than I can, like I said, but you can look at the aortic valve in basically 3D, and you can kind of turn it, look at it, say, oh, great. Yeah, the aortic valve looks like, you replaced it and it looks good. There's no jet shooting back. There's no, perivalvular leak. There's none of this stuff that we worry about. So it's really cool that you can do the biplane imaging in something that I can hold in the palm of my hand and put it on an iPad. So, I mean, if you want to talk a little bit about that, and then the needle out of plane visualization, which is cool. We talked about this before. It helps a ton when, especially vascular access, you've got somebody who's got a lot of adipose tissue that you're trying to find that needle.
Sure.
And it instead of just looking at the tissue kind of bouncing around, you can actually catch that needle, because you can use that needle out of plane technique and kind of find the needle itself, even though you're not in plane, right? So in plane would mean I was putting the needle like this. Instead, I'm putting the needle like this. Instead, I'm putting it like this, and I'm not seeing it come in. So,
yeah. No, I mean, I think, your point about biplane imaging, again, it goes back to that what the technology is based out of, right? That whole array matrix, to be able to activate different parts of that array to get live, 2 simultaneous sort of ultrasound windows at the same time, which is what biplane imaging provides, right? So looking at that heart, you can be able to take a look at it from both 2 different axes. And, again, like talking about the evolution, for those of you who've kind of been involved with Butterfly since its first start, it's just like, the common analogy we all say is just kind of the phone and the camera on the phone, right? When we first started, when smartphones first came out, right, oh, great, this is a camera, but I'm not taking away my SLR when I go on vacations, right? I'm still going to keep both of those. And maybe, I'll still have my iPod for my music and things. And then, but what happened, right? Like over time, as the technology got better, it all got integrated into
one device.
And so I think, what's happened in Butterfly's journey, and I think those who have watched it from when it first came out to now on our 3rd generation, is that we've been able to make lots of improvements on that technology, right? Which allows us to be able to get a much higher quality image, allows us to be able to kind of really offer a complex, ability of things like biplane imaging and that needle out of plane feature, right? Like, again, just the idea of like, okay, this is a, blessing and curse of having a single probe.
He's got one too.
He's got one in his hand too. Never, exactly.
I feel out of place here. I need one.
There you go. There you go.
It's always,
he already put some gel on it too.
All right. Yeah. Like it's like this, the whole body imaging, right, from one probe means you have to kind of marry different types of like physical hardware. And so, but how do you leverage that to be still something that you can use for like a linear probe, right? And that's what you just said about the idea of, that needle out of plane, instead of having that array come right in the middle, it now comes right here. So when your needle's coming in, it's activated that last array. So that's why you're able to see it within millimeters of entering the skin. So like that's, and again, the benefit of all that beam steering functionality and chip matrix.
We may need to make a longer video, but what we did in one of our last videos, which I don't know that we've totally released yet. We're still waiting to release that one. Is I was actually doing ultrasound guided vascular access and comparing the Butterfly with the cart base and So anyways, I mean it's aside from image quality being just as good or better, you definitely could see the needles sooner. So pretty cool.
My favorite highlight of the year so far is when you were doing blocks about 45 minutes from here. You had the cart based system. And then it wasn't working.
It just
and
shut off.
So you
my God.
And he had the device with him. So he changed over to the device. It was pretty cool to see. But I mean, you guys have talked about cardiac and pulmonary, applications for this. But another thing that you kind of want to demonstrate too is the gastric application for this.
I guess we can
for this device.
As long as you don't show my stomach, I think we're good. We can do a little bit of gastric scanning here. I had it set up earlier, so I'll.
So walk us through this. What app does it go through? It's a Butterfly app.
Yep, the Butterfly Network app. Yeah, and so basically, what I'm going to do a little gastric scanning. So I'll tell you that
we won't show this.
Yeah, no surprises here, but I had a rather large.
So it's right in your midsection. Yep. That's where you're putting it.
Yeah. So I'm just looking for my stomach here, and I'm okay at this, but not great. Let's see if I can get it. So you can see right there. You can see just all that stuff rolling around. So I had a nice big meal. I had a gigantic Sonic drink and a couple of caramels, and then I had I had some taquitos for lunch. So you can see, and we won't get this too technical because the podcast is kind of for everybody, but you can just see a bunch of stuff in my stomach. If I hadn't have eaten, it would just look like a tiny, almost just a little circle in there. So and Davinder, you know as well as I do the economic costs of canceling cases. So maybe talk a little bit about why gastric scanning is so important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially, in this era of GLPs, right? So many people are taking it. Some people are not even telling us they're taking it, right? And then they show up, and then we have to deal with what do we do? And now, recommendations are changing by the week almost about whether we hold them or we not hold them. I know I personally have had to have some discussions with different types of providers where they didn't want to hold it because of the potential reflex and things like that with their glucose control. So then you're stuck, right? Like if you just try to go with because it's still, we're all in this phase of what do we do? Well, a gastric ultrasound, like you said, is the ability to quickly take a look and be able to tell if there's content or not, and being able to kind of rapidly make a decision right then and there, right? And what I've read, it seems that across the U.S., somewhere around 3% of cases in the United States, surgical cases, are canceled by just a questionable NPO status, right? And so, and if you think about, right, Brian, you know this better than I do, about how much does every hour of the operating room cost, right? And so if you cancel one case, right, and have to delay and try to move schedules and try to do this, that in itself, the delay in management, even by just a few cases a year, you more than pay for the Butterfly device. Actually, you pay for several devices just from preventing those kinds of case cancellations. And again, we're not trying to change management decisions. We're just trying to determine whether or not the person, like in other words, putting patients at risk. We're just trying to see now definitively, is there content or not? So then you can decide whether you want to proceed, rather than having to, again, to what we talked about earlier, just guessing, right? Guessing on what do we think and taking that risk, right? So, it's about
$170 a minute, I think, is what they calculate operating
for an operating.
Yeah. So if you got an OR that's down for an hour because you're waiting on the next case, 60 times 170 is more than the cost of a
POCUS device,
Butterfly IQ3 for sure. So I'm pretty good telling you empty versus food. My problem is that kind of gray area of, do they have some liquid in there, and now what do we do, right? So that's and I think actually and I didn't go through the whole thing on here, but I think actually if you do some kind of fancy things with looking at you look at some like M mode and that sort of stuff, you could probably determine how much liquid's in there and do a Simpsons and all that kind of stuff. So there's some fancy things you can do with this that I certainly can't do with a cart-based system. So
I think gastric volume calculator. Oh, sorry to cut you off.
No, please go ahead.
Get you that specific volume if you are looking to kind of like, I find it useful for sort of documentation purposes, right? Like, the fact that, like, great, now we have this calculation built in, you can save that image, and then, if you're connected, you can put that in, or you can even just text it to the surgeon. I've done that before too. And like, that kind of solves the discussion, because now you have kind of like, again, a formal report showing what that volume is.
I usually just threaten to let them puke on their shoes, not mine. So.
There you go. That works.
Davinder, what's the future look like here as we go into the AI world, right? I mean, you guys are using a lot of that technology, and without giving away the trade secrets of the company, what are you working on next? And how do you see really the future of AI working hand in hand with this POCUS device? And do you think, would there ever be a time that this would be in the hands of the general public where they can purchase something like this, maybe on an airplane, right? You're looking at use cases where you can use something like this, and, it would be in the general public's hands in emergency type situations.
A great question. Love it. Okay. So I will dive into first talking about handheld ultrasound, right? Like in the sense of just, when handheld ultrasound first came out, it was kind of like, to say it frankly, kind of like a gimmick. Like, it was nice, great. Now I can provide a picture, right? Like, so, I can wheel this, I can have this out of my pocket, I can get a picture of the heart or picture of something, but I'm not going to use this for like, all my nerve blocks, or I'm not going to use this formally to do, my full day worth of, ultrasound imaging for diagnostic or for procedural. But, what's happened, right, is that, again, just that camera analogy that we talked about before, is that image quality has gotten closer and closer, if not, matching CART systems, and the functionality has come along with it, right? So, the integrative, so back to your point about technology advancements, it's not just about providing a great, pretty picture, but also providing the tools like biplane imaging, needle out of plane, and the connectivity. So full integration into your EMR, full reporting, all the worksheets, all those things that we still kind of associate to a CART, formal CART system where you're going and going to a computer, documenting. All of that now exists in Butterfly's ecosystem, right? To be able to really truly be the workhorse, and that's available today. So one, I think, is just sort of still at that awareness phase of like what you thought handheld POCUS was, maybe 5-10 years ago, is not what it is now. Now, going to your point about AI, I think the exciting thing about AI, if you just to geek out with me for a second, right? Like if you look 3 years ago, if you think about how many submissions in medical imaging for AI, there was less than 50. Then 2 years ago, went to like 100 plus or something. Last year, it was over 300 different submissions to the FDA. Because again, we're seeing it with ChatGPT and all these other things, right? AI is penetrating because the data is allowing that to happen, and all these machine learning. Butterfly, because of our cloud connectivity, sits on the largest amount of ultrasound imaging data for any like times 100. And so the benefit of that is that we are able to hopefully harness that to be able to develop some really neat pieces of technology. We already see some of that with like our beeline counter that allows for you to be able to quantify those beeline counts without you having to manually count that. We're in the process, and again, try to make myself, not that we have some great publications out there showing the ability of for obstetrical ultrasound, a technology that allows you to just blind sweep the abdomen. You don't even have to know how to do the full obstetrical ultrasound exam. And again, in a research environment, you can do that and get calculations on the fetus without having any training. So that's where it's pointing to. Vahid and Brian, I think, is that AI is going to allow for certain imaging to be able to get that screening information, about, for obstetrical ultrasound, maybe for cardiovascular screening. I think bladder volume is something that, we often forget, but often that's such a valuable tool for patient care.
Yeah, post-mortem residuals.
So that ability to allow, a wide variety of clinicians who may or may not have ultrasound training to be able to use the device, with leveraging technology. And then to your point about patients, well, again, if you think about this as just a sensor, just like your Apple Watch, right? This is a super high fidelity sensor. And so the ability of being able to harness that to be able to get data and then give it back to the patient without having to, rely on them to see the ultrasound image, that gets really exciting to how I think a consumer could use it.
I mean, I think it'd be cool on a plane. I don't know how many
100%.
How many times have you been called on a plane, right? Like, and they're like, "Hey, what do we do with this guy?" I mean, I don't know, right? So we bring this back to The Pit.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the TV show The Pit. Have you heard of this show?
Yes.
Are you watching it at all?
Yeah,
right?
I just started watching my first episode, actually. Yeah.
So they POCUS everything. I mean, everything is point of care ultrasound. So I'm just thinking, like, if I'm on a plane, I'll just throw on the, I carry mine with me most of the time. But if you guys had a contract with maybe like Delta or United or American Airlines, where there was one on the plane and they said, "Hey, is there a doctor on here?" You could run up, see the patient real quick, grab the probe. Yep, heart looks good, lungs look good. Man, he probably just passed out. He's fine or whatever. So I think that'd be a great thing.
The rate of emergency landings maybe would go down, right?
It gives you so much. Yeah, it's just a cost savings.
That's right.
Again, back
I think you're absolutely. Oh, sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
No. Say what you're gonna say.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you're absolutely that whole use case. The unlock to me is that, okay, well, we're getting closer and closer to can the device prompt you, right? So even if you're a clinician, you may not know how to do a heart scan, right? But the device can real time place the probe just like an AED, right? If you think 20 years ago, no one thought you would be shocking people at a Walmart or anything. That was only in the hospital, right? And so now, again, can we leverage the ability of AI to be able to say, hey, step one, expose the chest, place the probe here after putting gel, move up and down, and it spits out that information for you, right? Like to make your clinical decision, it just gives you more data.
Well, it's gotten almost to the point, and we talked about this at the conference that the beam is putting in your area of interest. The beam is moving to put your area of interest in the highest fidelity point, and there's a lot of things that the probe is doing already that we even as clinicians don't notice, but just the software knows what it's doing. I think you're probably not far away from, like you said, like an AED. Somebody, even if there's no, or maybe there's a nurse on the plane, but not a physician or a nurse practitioner or whatever. And it just says, yeah, hey, put the probe here. And then it just reads out all the data and over maybe something like Starlink, which I hear they're putting on United planes. Sends it to a physician. Yeah. So I think it's a good idea.
And don't get crazy here. I don't want people coming at me but we were talking about, how this is just the beginning for Butterfly and this kind of device. Remember on the planet that, the what is it called? The phone before the iPhone, the BlackBerry.
Oh, the BlackBerry
was once a thing too, and everybody thought the BlackBerry was, and then a little device called the iPhone came around.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I'm not saying a cart-like device is like a BlackBerry, but as technology improves, it's like, okay, now these health systems maybe are opening their eyes to what's possible.
Yeah.
Right. And not just locked into the same old. There's different way of doing things.
Well, I can buy 20 of these for the price of one of the cart-based. So, I mean, I think if you're looking at, you're looking at wanting to do POCUS more effectively. And I even equate this in some ways to the video laryngoscopes, right? So our original video laryngoscopes were these gigantic, the screen was this big. You had to drag a big thing, and then they got smaller with a couple different companies that made them, and now they have a handheld one. So I think it's probably similar in that regard. I did have a question though. Yeah. So, and one thing I kind of wanted to point out, for me, I have an iPad based EMR, and so for me, I'm not showing anything.
Oh, okay.
You're fine.
Well, we wanted to see the iPad Mini and there we go.
Compare it, exactly.
So I have an iPad-based EMR. So for me, it easily integrates into my EMR, just because it's on the same system. I just click it right over. How's the integration with, let's say, an Epic or a Cerner or something that's more of a computer-based system, not iPad-based system?
Yeah, so we have full integration capabilities, just like any other. There's several of those ultrasound imaging platforms out there. We call ours Compass, and it has that complete end-to-end, so it can, populate, whether you want a work list generated patient list, right, for your procedural day, or you want to on the fly do an encounter-based work list, and have that go back and forth between your EMR, save the images, do a worksheet that you can do. I think most clinicians still do the worksheet on their, going onto our cloud and sit on a computer and do it, but you can do it from your smart device as well. So again, all of that, just like several other competitors out there. But I think the neat part about it is that it all connects seamlessly from your app, right? Like, so that's like end to end, the ability to have full integration into your EMR. So, and some exciting potential updates coming in that area as well for connectivity. So I'll leave it at that.
He's not going to give any.
No,
it's
fine. He's a smart man. Yeah, you better tune into the next time that we chat.
That's right. That's right. Let's hopefully we can talk again end of sumber. How about that?
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. 6 months.
That sounds good.
So okay. So I've got a couple closing questions. Number one, what is your favorite part about working for Butterfly?
Oh, mission for sure, right? Like, the stories. We have a thing here where on a weekly basis, we kind of circulate around and kind of expose a case that, where somebody's life was changed or something that happened. And we get them all the time. We have the intake funnel for it. So we try to circulate that. So, it's a very mission driven company. And, I believe in the value of point of care ultrasound. So, and Mary as well with it.
Nice. Okay. I did want to share one new thing we're using the Butterfly for at the hospital I work at. They've started using it now for the ioveras. Have you heard of iovera? It's essentially a cold ablation of the genicular nerves for knee pain. Anyway, they were stealing the radiology ultrasound and bringing it back and forth, and radiology got ticked. So I gently suggested that they purchase a Butterfly IQ3.
Wow.
And so that's what they're using now
Wow.
instead. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So-
And so, because that's a pretty, pretty superficial kind of area
Yep.
to scan,
Mhm.
and they're getting adequate image quality. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And so the question we ask everybody, would you do it all over again? And is there anything you'd change? This is what we ask every guest who comes on the show. So
Yeah, you mean with my role, or just like
what's
And your
your
journey,
your
and-
journey
yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So I'll answer that like in a couple different ways. Like, one is I still, we often talk about the success stories of POCUS, like, hey, I diagnosed this. I still hold back to, there was a period of time where I, finished training and I was not a POCUS practitioner. I didn't know that skill. And I still think back, there's still cases that I regret because the patient had complications. And I just wonder, I'm like, I still think about, whoa, what if I had just looked at, and I missed that pneumothorax, or hey, I missed the fact that I thought it was this versus that, missed the aspiration when I, try to switch out the tube. So I think that's something that, like, in terms of regrets, is that if I knew what POCUS was, if I even had exposure to POCUS, I when I went through training, it didn't even, like, no one, it was an emergency medicine thing. I barely even knew what the FAST exam was, right? Like, I knew it was an idea, but I never thought I could do it. And so, so that's probably one thing fundamentally is just learning that what POCUS is at an earlier time. I think that would be one. And then, the other now, so that's kind of like the, whatever the clinical care one that kind of I still always kind of hold on to and try to do good by pushing the specialty further with these technologies and things. The other is just kind of in passing about any physician who wants to do this kind of transition to other areas, right? I would say the eye-opening thing for anesthesiologists, especially for people who are tuning in for this, is that it's amazing that when you go through med school and all these training, you have to risk stratify what's going on and make a decision plan, right? If you take very loosely that idea and concept and apply it to other areas, like I'm currently doing with in my certain roles, that it's amazing how beneficial that is. And so I say that, not to kind of just say that as a generality, but actually encouraging physicians to say, if you want to try something different, realize that you may actually already have some skill sets that you don't even know you could leverage until you get exposure to those opportunities. And so, just kind of throw that out there to encourage everyone to kind of, if they do have a passion to try something, you may be actually already got a leg up that you may not even know about.
Nice. So are we going to see the device on any popular television shows or movies? Or
well, you just mentioned one that
I know that's
maybe
okay, great.
Yeah,
great.
I love these teasers.
We're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to do a video.
We'll have to follow up.
Yeah. Excellent.
will,
all right, we'll give you the last word before we close it out.
The last word again is just like what you thought about handheld POCUS. Take another look, right? Technology has really changed a lot, right? Take another look at what handheld POCUS can do, what it can do for you and your care. And bottom line, learn how to do POCUS first off, right? And just again, see the value of handheld devices because it's in a new light now.
Awesome. Davinder, thanks so much for joining us here. It was a great conversation. Yeah. Let's do it again here.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds great. No, thank you guys for the time. It's been a lot of fun.
Dr. Davinder Ramsingh joining us here from the Butterfly Network on Going Under, Anesthesia Answered with Dr. Brian Schmutzler. We'll see you in the next one.